In this video, I'm going to take you on a tour of the new Space Explorer tool. The first thing you'll notice after installing the new tool and the updates to the tooling is there's a new Explorer tab. So what I want to do is take you through a tour of the tool, but use a sort of real development cycle to show how the tool can be used to interact with development, but also be used to kind of navigate your way through pieces of functionality, libraries and modules that might be given to you by colleagues in your development team. So to do that, what I want to do is create a new module, and I'm going to use the new module wizard to quickly create a my test module, and I'm going to import that into the front end fulcrum. I'll take the unit tests off for the moment, and I'll show you. We'll have a groovy example script in there. So that's been created, and I can now return to the Explorer tool, and I can go and look at that module in the modules list. So it was called my test module, and we see here that this table gives me a listing of all the modules in the system. Let me just take the search filter off. See, I have various modules in my system. I can sort by the name, I can sort by the version numbers, so on and so on, and I can filter the list by typing in a subset of the identifier for it, or the name. So here we see my test module. If I click on the test module name, I get offered several options to look at that module. I can see the details, I can see references to this module, so other modules that might be importing this module, and I can see the module XML. Now, we can see that this is the space architectural structure that's been created as boilerplate from the module wizard, and we see that I've got a root space, I've got some files in here, I've got a mapper, I've got this groovy script that's running as the thing that was created for me, but it's not entirely clear, and there's a lot of noise in the information. So let's see how the tool can help me look at that in a more clear way. So I go back to my modules view and filter down on that my module again. I can go and look straight away and see a sort of high-level view of what that module structure looks like. So let's look at the static structure diagram. And we can see here that I have a root space, I've got some static resources in there, a mapper overlay which is doing some request mapping from one identifier to another identifier, and then inside the mapper there's another space, the mapper space, and here we see we've got some static resources here and some imports as well. I can see what libraries are used in this library by turning the library view on, so I can see that it's importing Groovy and it's importing FreeMarker, and I can save the SVG if I want to keep a record of that. I can zoom in and zoom out if the scale's wrong, etc. And I can also see where this module, what's actually contained in the physical module itself. So the directory structure, or the jar file that will contain these resources, is called test module, and you see at the moment it just has R spaces in. The Groovy and the FreeMarker are coming from somewhere else. So let's go and look at this module and look at and edit some of the details of it. So here's the module XML, and first of all we see that it's given this root space a fairly useless name, so I'm going to call it my video demo space, and the mapper has a space in it, and this space has no name at all. So I'm going to give this a name of my mapped video demo space. So let's save that, and let's go back and look at the diagram again. Give that a chance to just be detected by the system again. Reload that link, and we see now that it's now called My Video Demo Space and My Mapped Video Demo Space. So I've given it a much more useful name, and it corresponds now with what I'm thinking about and working on. So I can look through this space and I can see that inside there is this mapped space, and it imports Groovy and FreeMarker. Well, I don't want FreeMarker. I'm not interested in FreeMarker unless for some reason the wizard decides that it thinks it's a useful templating technology. I don't want that. I just want Groovy. So let's save the module again. Return to the view. Give it a chance to pick up the changes and rejig itself. Look at the view again. We now see my space, the mapped space, and now the mapped space just contains Langroovy. Now it might be that I can't remember what the services are that are contained in Langroovy. So I can click on the cloud, the Langroovy imported space, and I can see the space details for that space. So let's click on that. This takes me into a view of the Groovy address space. We can see that it has a Groovy runtime and there's a Groovy prototype. There seems to be some representations here, and there's some transreptors. Let's look at the interface for the Groovy runtime. So what I get now inside the tool is a view of the dynamically generated metadata description of the interface. So I see the base active URI argument for this tool is active Groovy. I see that it requires one mandatory operator argument, and this is the Groovy script that we're going to run, and that will accept any number of variable arguments, so we can add as many arguments as we want. It supports a good range of resource request verbs. Its response will be whatever we define inside. And to use this tool, I need to import Langroovy in my address space. We can see now that the documentation for the tool is now embedded in the Space Explorer, and we can get a detailed explanation of how it might be used and the various features of the language. Notice also that in the top right we also still get a link back into the sort of contextual book for the Groovy language. So I can click on that and be taken into the regular documentation view. I can see the Groovy, I can understand how it fits in, I can see any guides, etc., etc. So the Space Explorer tool is providing me with specific endpoint documentation for a given endpoint when we view it, but I can always go back and contextualize it in the book that's associated with the technology, with the tool. So let's pop back out of Groovy. I can pop back with this navigation bar. The navigation bar also gives me a number of different options. So for example, rather than looking at the space details, which is where we came from, I can find out which spaces are referencing Groovy. So who in the system is currently importing the Groovy library. So here we can see in my system Groovy is used quite extensively. I've got a playpen, I've got a wiki, I've got some books, I've got soaps, I've got several different applications and services are using the Groovy language. I can also, if I want to, take a look at the spatial architecture of the Groovy language.